Hello, everyone. I'm Kelsey Nicole Nelson, and I'd like to welcome you all in to another episode, a part of our Special Olympics EKS 100 campaign. In this series, we're continuing to highlight the 6 Shriver cousins who are members of the inaugural Founders Council, and they're working very hard to continue to honor their trailblazing late great-grandmother, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, continuing the great work that she did to found this great movement of Special Olympics. This would have been Eunice's centennial year, and joining me today to continue the celebration, that's right, for her happy 100th heavenly birthday, I have Kathleen Shriver joining me. She is the vice chair of the Special Olympics Founders Council. Kathleen, how are you today? Thanks so much for joining me.
Good. How are you, Kelsey? Thank you so much for having me and for speaking with all of my cousins about this movement that has changed all of our lives, and we're hoping for it to change everyone else's who it has not touched yet.
It's been amazing. You and your cousins, I mean, you guys are the real deal. Doing this work on the ground. You guys have been doing it since 2018. And Kathleen, I feel like you could even be interviewing me, right? Graduate student attending the Columbia University School of Journalism and applying your journalism
I'm not
talent.
at your level quite yet, but I'm learning from people like you. So
very soon, very soon.
Yeah.
With that being said, Kathleen, how are classes going? How's school? And tell us how you've been using your journalism skills and talents for your Special Olympics charter with the Founders Council.
Yeah, absolutely. So school has been great. I've been learning so much. Learning how to storytell at Columbia has been really powerful for me in understanding how to tell the different mediums, the different and the different ways to tell the story of Special Olympics and to get the athletes' voices heard, because that's the most important aspect of all of this.
And you said it, journalism is storytelling. When people ask me like one word to describe myself, I'm a storyteller, and that's what we're doing. And you're continuing to storytell through the message of Special Olympics and share the story. And with that being said, Kathleen, how has the Founders Council worked to really share the story of inclusion, especially with a brand new generation of young people coming into the world, a world that some would say maybe is a bit divisive?
So I think first and foremost, the Founders Council was built because my grandmother wanted her family to continue to be involved in the movement, and for the message of inclusion not to be lost. And I think the reason she felt like her family could do that is because of the skills that family teaches you in inclusion, in patience, in crossing divides. Family can be tough sometimes, and we all have differences of opinions. And in order to keep a family together, you have to learn how to not compromise, but to communicate, to work together, to collaborate, to listen, to be patient, all of those things. And to see difference and not fear it and not run away with it, not get angry with it, but to encounter it. And I think that's one of the greatest skills my grandmother gave my parents' generation, my father and his siblings, and us grandkids. In addition, we also all grew up with the Special Olympics movement, which was another incredible teacher, I would say, for all of us, but in my own experience, for me, of seeing, since I was just so young, difference so frequently, and being taught how to encounter it, but not really having to be told, because I was so young, just by being told, go play. And that was my grandmother's genius, was, you know, people were scared of difference. People still are scared of difference. So she used an outlet that people understood. People might not understand difference. They might not understand Down syndrome, but they understand a basketball court or a tennis court or a baseball field or a swimming pool. So she said, people might not understand difference, but they'll understand the pool. So just get in the pool and get everyone together. We're living in such a more tolerant society than the one that my grandmother lived in. And I feel so lucky. And I know she contributed to that. But our job as Founders Council members now is to make sure that our society might be more tolerant, but this is the age of social media. And like you're saying, a lot of divisiveness, and so much can happen without seeing one another, without encounter these days, which is not how it used to be. So we do have kind of an obstacle there. And that's another reason I am in journalism school is to understand how to use media and the internet for good, but also to recognize the difficulty of it.
Right.
Especially for people who are different, especially for people who have disabilities. They have had it really, really hard. We have made it really difficult for them. And they are warriors, and they are the bravest people, some of the bravest people in our society who should be teaching all of us. So this is not about a movement about being brave and being nice to each other. It's about listening to people who've been so brave their entire life and have really made it through things that a lot of us could never imagine. One of the things that I've been working on with the Founders Council with my cousins is to find the right ways to communicate to the larger society and to people our age who are more tolerant and who are more open, how to live the inclusion revolution in their own lives if they're not able to, if they're not able to go do unified sports at their school or something or anything like that. How do they live inclusively?
We had a chance to actually meet in New York in person during the pandemic, of course, following COVID-19 protocols. And what you all did, what Special Olympics was able to do with the Be Brave initiative, I thought was so powerful. And I want to talk with you more about that to really introduce our audience to it. For you, Kathleen, how special was it to be able to have someone like a celebrity photographer like Nigel Barker, who everyone knows? I mean, he's at the top of his game. Having these Special Olympic athletes really be able to model and push the message of the inclusion revolution, partnering with someone like the Parsons School of Design, right? A top design kind of school with talented people. How special was that to see Special Olympics be able to form these bonds, and then Special Olympics athletes really live out their message about why it's so important for inclusion. And so many people got to see these pictures and the message during the most important fashion week in the world, I'd say, New York Fashion Week, Kathleen.
Yeah. No, it's truly spectacular. Like, I have chills even thinking about it again.
Yeah.
I'll start by saying I think my grandmother would be just I think she is. She's looking down and she is so proud and excited and just thrilled. She started, like I said, using the outlet of sport because that's one that she knew. And that's one that worked for her. Being a woman in society and wanting to have a voice at the dinner table and a voice in politics and a voice in everything, she realized that to get people to men to listen to her, she would get out on the playing field. So it's cool that her and her sister were collaborating to get both of their voices heard through sport. And just the fact that she started with sport and she pushed that so hard, but the reason to use sport is to push social change. And her dream is that she started with sport, but that we take it into every other field, because the idea is social change. I remember my grandmother, Rosemary, her sister, who is the co-founder of Special Olympics, she would come and stay in Potomac at my grandmother's house for several months at a time, every few months. So we saw a lot of her. And Rosemary would sit at the head of the table with my grandmother, or she would sit directly next to my grandmother. They were the two queens, and then my grandfather was on the other side of the table. And just one memory I always think back to, and I think in the last few years, I've been particularly struck by it, is my grandmother and her sister talking to each other. Because I couldn't really understand Rosemary. I couldn't understand what she was saying a lot of the time. She had a hard time verbally. And so she would kind of mumble things and say things in a way that I didn't really try to hear. I just would look straight. I would look at her and I would give, I'd greet Rosemary, greet grandma, like sit down, we'd say prayers. And then my grandmother would ask a question, or someone would ask a question. We'd all talk about it. And then Rosemary would speak about it too. And I would just look straight to grandma. And grandma would would start asking Rosemary questions in response to what she was saying. And then would give kind of like a little bit of a translation to all of us. And I was always just like, that is the coolest thing in the world. Even when I was little, if I were to go back to that dinner table, I would try and listen to Rosemary, and I would try really, really, really hard. Because that's the point of this movement. It's not for just someone's sister or brother to be helping them. It's for us to learn ourselves from the message of these athletes, which might be more difficult. It might take a longer time for us, but that's actually teaching us.
Right.
And she has a message. And I think what she's, her message was always to society, to everything, was listen to me, hear me. I have a message. I have a gift. I have gifts. Right. I have an incredible life that needs to be seen and heard.
Yeah.
And I think that in the last few years, I've thought back to that experience in that new way of kind of, okay, like, even though I thought that was cool when I was little, I think my grandmother was pretty cool and would just kind of go to her. And today, I think what's really struck me is how cool and powerful Rosemary's message was, and the job we all have at hand to make sure we're really making that extra effort and learning from people with differences.
Yeah, I think your story is so powerful, Kathleen, and it took me back to a place for me growing up, because I have an uncle that had Down syndrome. My mom is 8 of 9, so my mom was the closest to him. And I remember, like you said, at first, my mom was always kind of that communicator, but early on, she'd be like, no, you need to learn what Uncle Rod wants. And for me, it was great. I remember, like, and may he rest in peace, he would go like this. He used to love Checkers and Rowley's hamburgers. So when he went like that, that's what he wanted. And he wanted to sit and get his hamburger, and we'd sit outside in the backyard of my grandmother's swing. And like you're saying, the power of sport, and started to communicate and talk. And then, like my mom, I was able to tell other people what he meant. And our whole neighborhood eventually, of course, understood my Uncle Rob. But like you said, it takes all of us to learn, not just one or two of us. It takes all of us. And many times they're saying incredible things. And like you said, it's just taking time to just sit back and listen. And I think this is honestly what society can learn as a whole. Sometimes we just have to sit back and listen to each other, right? So I think that's so powerful. And I'm so happy you shared that message, Kathleen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And really letting us into your life and your grandmother and Rosemary. So thank you so much for sharing that.